Final Fantasy Discourse is in a really dumb spot right now due to some intentionally bad actors making it even dumber than normal. That isn't to say it
Oh, dude, his character even looks like Wesker, dude. Okay, that's cool.
isn't valid if you aren't enjoying yourself right now, but there's a level of hyperbole and nostalgia that is muddying things, whether people want to admit it or not. Criticism is always an art form, and not all art is well made. It's all valid on some level, but a lot can be less healthy or less well put together. It gets even worse when outrage merchants are making bad art. One of my main criticisms with the game is the community and their lack of properly being able to constructively criticize or have any nuance, even without outrage merchants trying to profit. A job being weaker is automatically a job being complete garbage and calls for Yoshi P to be called the worst director ever.
This guy's nicer than me because this person thinks that like all criticisms are valid, and me, I don't. I think some criticisms are just stupid and that they should just shut their fucking mouth. That's what I think.
Then when the people who actually took time to properly voice their complaints and are heard, people get angry because those people actually made real effort instead of screaming into the void. Of course, that doesn't apply to everyone. There are plenty of people who have genuine complaints and real reasons and do want to have real conversations about it. But even some of those people I feel like either don't have the hindsight that kind of shows Endwalker isn't nearly as bad as the worst expansion, or literally forgot.
You guys think Endwalker is the worst expansion? I don't think it is. Like, so I have to separate my mind into two different parts, right? Like what I personally want and what's better for the game. I think Endwalker is fine. I think it's fine. I mean, could it be better? Yeah. But what is not good for the game is Heavensward. That's not good for the game, bro.
It's almost at the level I could call them.
But Heavensward was one of my favorite expansions. So I have to be able to, I guess, separate what I personally want with what I think is good with the game.
As and real reasons and do want to have real conversations about it. But even some of those people I feel like either don't have the hindsight that kind of shows Endwalker isn't nearly as bad as the worst expansion, or literally forgot. It's almost at the level I could call them liars and move on without feeling like I was being unfair. Anyone who has spent enough time around me knows I'm not entirely afraid to share my opinions. So
this is like the first time I've really ever, I guess, watched a video or heard of this person.
Think that if Endwalker was that bad, I would have no problems joining in to say Endwalker is the worst expansion.
There's a lot of content creators in the 14, man. I try to lurk a lot in the 14 directory. Like on Twitch anyway. Does this person stream on Twitch? They do? Okay, so 3 months ago, last year. Okay, so they do, but not a lot. Okay, anyway, the only reason why I was asking, if someone streams 14, that's a higher chance that I'll know of the person because I'm more on Twitch than I am on YouTube. You know what I mean? Anyway, no, I was just curious.
I don't have that criticism.
I was just curious.
At worst, Endwalker is, as the kids would say, just mid. The content we get is fun, jobs are generally balanced, and many other points that are positives for the game. The complaints, meanwhile, tend to be extremely fringe and don't apply to 90% of the player base. But what if Endwalker was so bad that they removed half the content during it, balance was seen as non-existent, with some jobs being called outright unviable, and rating didn't just have one fight that had 1 to 2% too much HP, but was instead gated by several weeks of gear and nearly killed rating entirely.
You know what he's talking about? He's talking about Heavensward.
And rating didn't just have one fight that had 1 to 2% too much HP, but was instead gated by several weeks of gear and nearly killed rating entirely. People would have a field day.
They would.
You think the Discourse is bad now? Imagine if that was Endwalker. So
Dude, they're not wrong, man. If you were to put in Heavensward today, I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine the outrage. I can't even imagine. The forums would be on fire. YouTube would be on fire. Everything would just be on fire, bro.
Let's talk about that a little bit and maybe give people some missing and forgotten perspective. Let's talk about the critically acclaimed MMORPG Final Fantasy XIV with an expanded free trial, which you can play through the entirety of A Realm Reborn and the award-winning worst expansion Heavensward, up to level 60 for free with no restrictions on playtime. And as a warning, there will be some massive spoilers for the game. Unfortunately, some topics require me to be spoilery. Yeah, that's right. The worst expansion in Final Fantasy XIV is Heavensward.
You guys agree with that or disagree? I disagree on a personal level, but I agree on the health of the game. So I disagree on a personal level because on a personal level, it was really hard and I enjoyed the challenges. But I agree on the level for the health of the game. Because here's what happens in Heavensward, man, is that the raid scene virtually died. Like, it came as close to death as possible.
So many people have joined this
Well,
game.
the thing is, man, the story, okay, now I know this is going to sound like cringe, but the story in Heavensward didn't matter. And you know why it didn't matter? Because there wasn't anyone playing it. You can argue with me all day that the story is important. And for a majority of cases, I'll agree with you. But if there's no one to play the game, then it doesn't matter. Like, if there's no one to enjoy the content because the game is so ass, then it doesn't matter. Heavensward MSQ was a thing that put the game on the map? No. See, you didn't play back then. I can tell you didn't play back then because you don't realize the mass fucking amount of people that stopped playing. Well, then you're fucking delusional because the amount of people that stopped playing in Gordius was insane. There was no one to do shit with, man. It was so hard just to get a P1 and 2 clear. I remember that there were Faust prog parties. Okay, for those of you that don't know who Faust is, imagine a door boss on the first turn and people had to prog it for like 2 weeks. I'm not talking about just like the raiding guys. I understand there were people that did the story and they didn't raid. But what I'm saying is that the people that did raid, that did do like trials and raiding and shit, a lot of them quit. That's what I'm trying to say. A lot of them quit. The player base severely dropped. That's what I'm trying to tell you guys. You can say that the story was super good, and that's fine. I'll agree with you. But you can do this story once. After that, the magic is gone. You know what I mean? Like, you already know what's going to happen. You know what I'm saying? Dude, the raiding was so hard that there were like multiple articles and like Reddit posts and forum posts about how it killed the game and how the game is like dying because of it, man.
Hearing them mention, unfortunately, some topics require me to be spoilery. Yeah, that's right. The worst expansion in Final Fantasy XIV is Heavensward. So many people have joined this game hearing the meme and so much praise for the expansion, but anyone who was there knows it was far from the beacon of purity it is now.
Yeah.
At best, it is second worst next to the base game. Far as I've heard, earlier Realm Reborn had 100 to 200 milliseconds of built-in lag, Warrior literally was unplayable in raiding to start, and
yeah, that's true.
And many other issues. This isn't a video made to specifically be a takedown of Heavensward, though in a way it is, because despite being part of that oh-so-famous meme, people remember Heavensward for something it wasn't. I'm not here to tell you you're wrong for liking the expansion, but when it comes to what the game has done wrong, huge swaths of it are being ignored for the high highs, or even what Heavensward is as of today, rather than what it was when it came out. This will be some needed context for many people who did not get to experience this. Heavensward was officially released on June 23rd, 2015. People were impressed with the storytelling and fondly remember it to this day. But when people say Heavensward is as good as it is, I think this is all they remember.
Yeah, that is all that they remember as the story. They don't remember, like, the fucking relics, the rating, the class design. Like, you guys have to understand that this is an expansion where some jobs were literally unviable. If you played a white mage, it was fine in Gordius, but then you severely got outclassed in Midas because of the buffs to Astro. Paladin was absolute dog shit. It never saw raid. Monk was also pretty much deleted. Those jobs were pretty much unplayable.
Because almost immediately the expansion was plagued with troubles and criticisms. Starting off, you know how we have a patch cycle of 4 months now? Due to the game being so big and all now. Well, back when the expansion launched, we got a taste of this. Yoshi P did the most evil thing in the world. He's so terrible a person. You should all unsub right now because he sucks so bad. He gave the dev team a vacation. Yeah, really. People got angry about it. It might have been just a very small minority.
Look. How ironic. Posted by Monk. Can the dev team get a break?
People got angry about it. It might have been just a very small minority, but at the time there was a noticeable reaction to this dastardly, evil plot to not overwork the dev team. The raid tier was delayed, I believe, and later patch 3.1 ended up releasing November 10th.
Was the raid tier delayed? I don't remember that, man. It's too far.
Year. So it's not even a significant delay. So yeah, not really a mark against Heavensward, just people being dumb that kind of soured the mood at the time.
Okay.
If community or people is a complaint anyone has and genuinely puts it against Endwalker, well, you better put way more against Heavensward. My god.
Yeah, like, no, I think they bring up a good point, right? The meme is the critically acclaimed expansion, but it's actually not, man. The story was super good, obviously, right? But the expansion itself was pretty rough for a lot of people.
Odd. We could talk about balance and opinions on that, but ultimately things shifted to a very rigid meta of Dragoon, Ninja, Bard, and Machinist.
Yeah.
It wasn't even close. What with Trick Attack being at its most loved, and Dragoons giving a passive damage boost to both the Bard and the Machinist, was a disembowel. It used to increase all piercing damage on a target, which means the ranged jobs got to benefit. By this point, the opinions on Astrologian came around as well.
Yeah.
Seen as weak at launch from everyone I talked to,
Yeah.
it got so many different adjustments every patch, more than any of the other.
One of the adjustments, there were three major adjustments that Astro got. One was Disable. Disable lowered the boss's damage by like 10%. The other thing was the balance buff. So the card balance, back in the day, it would give you 10% damage increase. Yeah, but for your like whole party. So it went 5 for AoE, 10 for extended, and then enhanced was like 15, right? Okay, so for those of you that don't know, Astro actually had like intricate system with the cards. Your Astro could enhance the card, which would buff the single target card. It could make the card an AoE, or it could extend the duration on the card. You could do all three of those things for every single card there is in the game. Balance was damage. Ewer was mana. Arrow was skill speed and like spell speed, I think. Bowl was damage reduction, which was actually really good in Prague. Spire was TP. Yeah, so back in the day, Astros were extremely intricate. But those buffs pretty much shit all over White Mage.
Other job from everyone By this point, the opinions on Astrologian came around as well. Seen as weak at launch from everyone I talked to, it got so many different adjustments every patch, more than any of the other jobs. Well, aside from maybe Bard. Some people
Here's like another thing too to think about is just because that this expansion was critically acclaimed doesn't necessarily mean that it had the highest player count either. So you can praise it for being critically acclaimed and all that shit, but as far as the player count, it was kind of in the shitter. So if you want to think that that's a win, then I guess that's you, but I do not. I would rather have players playing the game than what a critic revealed the game as never playing it before.
Greatly miss Bowmage. Many others despised it, myself included. It wasn't even like it was a job rework. 1 to 50 played the same as it did before Heavensward. It's just you had to Bowmage in Heavensward. Quick tangent, people complain about jobs losing their identity in Endwalker, but nothing compares to a Realm Reborn Bard into Heavensward Bard. The playstyle shift is about as extreme as Old Summoner to Endwalker Summoner, but again, that's without the full rework that gives Summoner a consistent identity from 1 to 90. Summoner is a physical ranged. Even people who like Bowmage call it Bowmage. And when there's 5 fewer jobs to play as, your options for begrudgingly changing your main were fewer. And Machinist was a gun mage. That one is fine because it's a brand new job, but come on. Anyway, back to the...
Yeah, so for those of you that don't know, basically, if you play Bard or Machinist now, in Heavensward, you were a caster. Think about that for a second. Think about playing a Bard or Machinist and actually having to cast like a vast majority of your abilities. So that's what they're talking about.
Balance talk. Casual groups still really never needed to care about balance, but they did. Even in Stormblood, when balance had been improved, Samurai was often excluded from even extreme level content.
That's true.
Combine this with the same player base that invented Skip Sort or Disband, and you get a recipe for the meta being mirrored even where it isn't needed. Which it wasn't even needed in Alexander Creator Savage either. That was mostly for speedruns, but I even saw groups forcing the meta for anima weapon farms. Well, we had some true imbalances in...
Like, guys, okay, you need to understand something here. What this person said, you can clear with shitty jobs, but the discrepancy between meta and non-meta was so vast that the shit the hardcore people were doing, it was so bad that the fucking casual people were doing it too. Like, guys, I'm not talking about just the damage. It was damage, utility, accessibility. All of those things was so vastly better with the correct job versus the non-correct job that even casual players were doing it.
Problems. perceived imbalances made things worse and worse. Look back at the intro for this video. This is what I mean with weaker being perceived as trash. While much of the discussion is a community issue, it stems from genuine problems the balance of the game had. For as intense as the conversations around balance are now, it was worse back then, plaguing even the casual scene more than it does today. Rather than taking word as gospel, take it with a grain of salt.
Yo, real quick, how many people queue up to this? You get this boss, and half your alliance fucking dies instantly. This boss, Death Gaze, is one of the hardest fucking roulette bosses of all time.
Xeno goes on a rant about tanks. Hi Xeno, you might have been told to react to this because it's in vogue right now, and I get it. Gotta pay the bills. Don't just blindly believe him, even when he's right. A tiny bit of skepticism will go a long way to getting you to understand the criticism way more, get you involved in the conversation, and perhaps even actually be able to give constructive and actionable criticism too, rather than aimless anger and no way for them to fix it, because they don't know what fixing it means to you.
This is why everything I say, I loop and I explain myself like 3 times. And I've said this from like all the way from when I first started to like make videos and shit, man. Blindly believing someone, especially a person that doesn't give you a reason, is bad. You need to think. You need to use your brain. You need to see evidence. You need to hear reasoning. If someone says something, shut the fuck up. If someone says something and they don't give you a reason, then you need to question why that person said the specific thing.
Again, this isn't also to say everyone is blinding agreeing with him as such, but I've been seeing it happen over and over since I joined the game. Hell, I can guarantee I was part of it. But I took time to learn the game, learn myself, and actually be able to agree with things on an honest level instead of mindless parroting. I often disagree. Hell, this entire video is almost a takedown of Heavensward as an expansion just to prove a point. And you know there's going to be dozens of comments who never make it past me calling it the worst. But I can absolutely say I'm much more learned and informed than I was back in the day.
I want to see real quick. I want to see if they're right. Stormblood was the worst expansion for me. Yo, can I delete this comment? Oh, I can't. Can I report it for stupidity?
Which I could probably end the video there with showcasing my point. Actually put effort into your criticism. Don't just parrot what a guy said without understanding what he said. But the part of the point was also how short-sighted people are. They forget their history and see the forest for the trees. Speaking of job balance, stat balance.
Yo, bro, watch this.
But the part of the point was also
all of these motherfuckers are dead. D-E-D.
Also how short-sighted people are. They forget their history and see the forest for the trees. Speaking of job balance, stat balance. Do you remember what direct hit was? How it didn't exist back in Heavensward? Did you even know direct hit wasn't always there? Do you remember the numbers, Mason? Because direct hit used to be accuracy, a stat I don't know anyone really misses. If you missed it...
Nah, doesn't Lynx miss accuracy? Or wait, no. Wait, did he say that? No, I don't think he said that. He said some other stupid shit. I can't remember anyway.
Please do tell me why, because in practice it was no better to me. Accuracy does what you expect. Increases your accuracy up to a 100% guaranteed hit.
I mean, okay, now, I didn't like accuracy, but I think accuracy serves more of a purpose than direct hit. Direct hit doesn't serve any purpose. It's just another form of crit that has no purpose. Why do you have direct hit and crit in the game? Like, there's too many layers of RNG. One ability shouldn't hit for 130k or 30k. Like, that's fucking stupid. When you have both those in the game, it doesn't make any sense. At least accuracy had a purpose. You have 2 stats in the game that virtually do the exact same thing. They both do the exact same thing, right? One of them is weaker. At least accuracy made it to where you hit the boss. Now, was it good? No, but it served more of a purpose than what direct hit does. Like, I hate direct hit and I hate accuracy. I think the stats in this game, they're insanely boring. Like, I think they need, that's another conversation. But my point here is that I actually think accuracy served more of a purpose than direct hit. I absolutely despise direct hit. I think direct hit is one of the worst things that this game's ever added. I think it's fucking trash.
Front, flank, rear, and casters all with different thresholds. Casters would stop at the caster cap, while everyone else would need to stack upwards of 700 accuracy to be able to hit stuff in the Savage Tier's final fight. It was kind of just something you had to do.
Yeah.
Purely an obligation.
Yeah.
Arguably, direct hit is a more boring stat, just a further option for doing more damage. It also increased the level of RNG for parsing at the very high end, but like, come on, that's just nitpicking at that point.
Well, while at first it might seem kind of stupid to bring up parsing, in some cases it's actually valid. And the reason why is because when you have these different layers of RNG, you create situations where you have a fucking, whatever that fucking ninja move is, man, or you have a double down and it crits for like 100K versus 30K. So that in itself is bad. Okay, now you take that situation. Now that's a normal situation, okay? You take that normal situation. Now apply it to like the Phoenix buff or in P8, right? You get the other Phoenix buff. So now it turns it from like 100K to like a 300K. The difference is even bigger. When I progged P8, we wiped it 0.1% because our summoner got 0 crits. Like, how stupid is that? How dumb is that? You do all the mechanics correctly. Even your rotation is good, but you just don't crit. There's nothing in your power that you could do to crit harder.
And just crit. Just crit.
But is that just a further option for doing more damage? It also increased the level of RNG for parsing at the very high end, but
Excuse me.
come on, that's just nitpicking at that point. But is it really all that any better to have a stat you pretend doesn't exist past the required minimum, where the game has no in-game way to see what amount you needed? People needed to put on the gear and just test. Luckily, Stone Sky C started this expansion so they could use the striking dummies, but it needed to be tested manually.
Okay, so get this. This is what people are calling the critically acclaimed expansion. They put accuracy caps in the game. The devs don't tell you what the caps are. You have to go in and manually meld your accuracy. Okay, so I have 320. Okay, I hit. Then the next pull, oh, you just got unlucky. You miss. Well, fuck, now I got to remeld. So now I got to do 330. Okay, I hit, miss, nope. Okay, got to go in 340. Okay, what about this? Yeah, you had to do that back in the day. You guys have to remember that back in the day, all of these fucking resources that you have now, like you have your trigonometry, you have all these discords. Basically, you have all of these people that are doing all of this tedious work for you. None of that existed back in the day. Not even Discord. You know who you had back in the day? You had Mr. Happy, Ms. Tech, and me. That's who you had back in the day.
Luckily, Stone Sky C started this expansion so they could use the striking dummies, but it needed to be tested manually, and this would be needed for every new tier if they kept the system, because while something like crafting numbers have been pretty consistent with being able to assume breakpoints beforehand, there's no way to know for sure until it has been tested.
Nah. You had one more person. You had Dervy. Dervy was a legend, bro. Dervy was a legend. He did all the stat weights, man.
And with how most everyone just grabs one of the agreed best-in-slot gear sets, being able to see multiple types of crits is probably more fun to everyone, huh? Number go up is enjoyable. But that's less specific than something like Black Mage and the racial bonuses. Back in Heavensward, stat numbers were so much lower, so 1 or 2 extra stats in something did mean way more than it does now. On top of this, Piety was actually a max MP boost. We didn't have 10,000 flat MP at all times. Skill cost also scaled with your level, so if Fire took about 10% MP at level 50, it would still take about that at level 60 due to how much it was set to cost at both levels. So stacking Piety could theoretically give you extra casts of Fire or such. If you were a Lalafell Black Mage, you didn't have to worry. You had that
Yeah, I remember. Oh, I vaguely remember that. Yeah. There was like strength tiers too. So like the Zella Aura, they have one of the highest strengths in the game. Yeah, it had something like that. Like you could break like a strength like break point or some shit, or you could make it. Yeah, like if you were the wrong race, it was really fucky and min-maxy. The race you played actually mattered to a certain extent. It wasn't like huge, like it wasn't as big as like in WoW, right? Because like back in the day in WoW, some of the racials were really super good, right? Final Fantasy was never that bad, but it did matter.
racial stat bonus to keep you going. Everyone who didn't have the Piety threshold needed to meld a Piety materia, or play a bit differently.
Now, his example of Piety, while you guys are probably like, well, it's only Piety, it's not that bad, that's just one example. There were other examples too.
The common rotation at the time only worked at that specific MP level, meaning those very few racial stats would lose you a Fire 4, or put you into a position where you didn't have enough MP to cast Blizzard 3 to start the Umbral phase. I don't recall this being an issue for level 50 content, so it even is an issue exclusive to Heavensward Black Mage. Though, correct me if I'm wrong and misremembering. That's not even the worst of it. There was the constant discourse around tanks and their stats. There have been shifts to what stat tanks use for DPS multiple times over the years. At this point, I believe tanks were completely based on the strength stat. So what would you do if your tank had a significantly lower HP amount because they were wearing Dragoon rings?
Nah, you know what? Wait. Hold on. Maybe they'll say it.
Nothing, because that was pretty normal. Lower HP amount because they were wearing Dragoon rings. Nothing, because that was pretty normal.
Yeah, okay, so just to give you guys an example here. Okay, so I have 118,000 health. Okay, well imagine healing a tank that only had 83,000 health, because that's what you did in Heavensward.
There's a reason why rings that have the same amount of strength and vit are locked specifically to a roll now, even if there's no tenacity attached. Even Stormblood had its own issues with this until we finally got the roll-locked rings and removal of main stat.
Bro. Okay, imagine playing a Dragoon and on your accessories, you don't have strength, you only have vit. I want you to think about that for a second. Yeah.
Criteria. Along the same trend is why we have 2 meld slots on rings, something that was extremely common and complained about one way or the other. Because your warrior missing a lot of HP for a raid tier already seen as killing the game was just too much. Oh yeah, you remember that? Alexander Gordius was often considered the death of raiding, and could even potentially be traced back to with how people say Ether is the only raiding data center. Complex
I was on Sarg, man, and it was hard to get parties.
And hard with the new and different rotations, a trash fight that I don't think anyone liked. I was the Gobwalker guy. A final fight most people never saw and was cheesed through, and the most infamous jiggly of them all. People were upset that P8S was 1 to 2% overtuned. Gordius needed weeks of gearing for most groups, with mechanics that were often seen as extremely finicky and bad.
Okay, Gordius needed weeks for most groups that cleared. And the groups that cleared were not very many.
Digititis? More like pingitis. Tethers? More like badthers. Even when you don't...
And you guys say I'm cringe. You guys say I'm fucking cringe.
Factor in those things, the fight was just really hard. Tight DPS check, tight execution, tight healing, it was all just hugely punishing. It's also stuff like this that make me say people were way worse players back in the day. The groups that could clear were already god gamers to we plebeians, but I'm very curious to how things would go if we got an A3S Unreal of sorts, or even just a fight people would compare to A3S. A lot of the doomsaying at the time involved people being worried that the game was going to die as a result of this. The complete collapse of rating is not good for any game, even one with minimal rating to begin with. Obviously, the game has recovered quite spectacularly, but has...
I think if they put a true A3S in the game, it would be very hard. I think mechanically people could get it, but I think offensively, like as far as people hitting their rotations and shit, I think it would give them a lot of trouble. So if you were to take A3 and put it in the game today, how the devs would do it is it would be easily cleared. But how if they were to do it to be true to back then, it would take about 3 weeks, 4 weeks worth of gear before you could clear.
Anyone genuinely said that rating is dead because of what happened in Pandemonium? I'm sure it didn't help that at the time, a wipe meant waiting up to 7 minutes for the next pull.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. Yeah, this was back at a time where, you know how you wipe and all your cooldowns reset? Yeah, they didn't used to do that. Let's say you used hollowed ground within the first, like, couple minutes of a fight and then you wiped. Yeah, you have to wait 7 minutes before it's up again.
Cooldowns didn't reset on wipe. If you wiped right after the Paladin used hollowed ground, you were waiting for that to come back.
Fake, nobody played Paladin.
To be available when it would be needed.
Okay, true. Okay, what about Living Dead, though? Earlier, guys, he brought up the DPS meta of double-ranged Ninja Dragoon. One of, if not the best classes in the game was actually Ninja. But before I talk about that, I briefly want to mention the tank meta, and the tank meta was Warrior Dark Knight 100%, no ifs, ands, or buts. It was 100% Warrior Dark Knight. If you took a Paladin, you had to 100% take a Warrior, and you were griefing. Warrior Dark Knight was superior in every single fucking way, and because Dark Knight was so good, it actually gave Monk the boot, because you didn't need Monk for dragon kick. The reason why ninja was one of, if not the best job in the game at the time, was because the ninja did everything. If your full party was a daycare, the ninja was the person in charge of taking care of all the kids, because the ninja made sure that the healers were smoke screened and never drew aggro, because tanks didn't want to use their tank stance because it was a DPS loss. Keep in mind the critically acclaimed expansion, by the way. Tanks not wanting to tank, they put that on the ninja. That's the ninja's fault. Oh, the white mage stole threat? That's the ninja's fault because you didn't use smoke screen. You didn't use whatever that fucking thing is, lucid dreaming or whatever. You need to shade walker me. You need to produce aggro and give it to me because I'm a tank and I don't want to tank because it's a DPS loss. Okay, another thing is sometimes like in this fight, okay, see how there's two ads here? Well, you had to tank separate ads. Well, the ninja had to follow the Dark Knight because the Dark Knight didn't have slashing. So now the ninja is sacrificing their own damage so the Dark Knight can do more damage. So the ninja is smoke screening healers, giving the tanks aggro, providing slashing debuff, and your Dragoon is screaming and crying for TP. God, I need TP! Goad him. The ninja's also giving goad and TP to the Dragoon. Every party, this is what happened if you didn't have a ninja. You ran into aggro issues. You had tanks dealing less DPS because now they have to turn on their stance. Healers drawing more aggro. You have overall less DPS from your other melee because they're running out of TP. I want you to compare those two situations. So you can take a ninja that can do all that, or you can take a monk that can't do any of that and does the same damage. Why in the fuck would you ever take the monk? That is how bad it was.
Then you have to wait 54 seconds for the Warriors countdown macro. Oh, did you not know about the 54-second long pre-pull opener for Warriors?
That's right. Here it is. There it is right there. The dream. We're dreaming, boys. Pulling in 50 seconds. Pulling in 30, Kappa. 25 more seconds, baby rage. 15, 10, 7, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's real. We're going to sit here for this minute. No, we're on the pull. No, we're about to pull. We're about to pull. Get ready. You guys ready? Just pull. Just pull. Just pull. Excuse me. All right. There it is. Yeah, it was a thing. A 50-second pull macro. You know why you did it? It was for an extra fell cleave in your opener. You guys are laughing at this now, but you have to remember that fell cleave was actually one of the highest DPS abilities in the game. Back in the day, warriors did like as much damage, if not more, than a physical ranged before they got the buff.
It was grueling and pointless, but that's a common theme for Heavensward.
Excuse me.
Crafting and gathering was the hardest to get into, even more difficult than it is with 90 levels to go through. While currently people suggest leveling every crafter for the shared materials, back then it was absolutely required to level every crafter. Today you can theoretically just be one crafting class, just buy the materials from the other crafters.
Okay, so I don't know about any of this, okay? Like crafting and all that crap.
Back then, if you didn't level every crafter, you were just outright a bad crafter. This is because of cross-classing. Every crafter had...
Okay, now, I do know a little bit about what he's talking about. Okay, if you look, I have Goldsmith. And look, I have all of these level 15. Now, you know me. I'm not a crafter, but I do have this leveled. And the reason why is because level 15 was the level you needed to have cross-class abilities. I was a Goldsmith because I wanted to make my crafted accessories because I played tank. So while I'm not a crafter, I do know a tiny little itty-bitty amount about what it was like to be a crafter back in the day.
Had some skills to give to the others, and so many of them obligatory. Every touch and synthesis action had a
I don't
success
remember
rate,
what the skills
so you
were
would
called,
need steady hand to boost
it's
it to
been too long.
100%. Careful synthesis was a cross-class. Tricks of the trade, manipulation, Beauregard's blessing, inner quiet. All main tools you used for crafting were all cross-class skills.
Yeah.
Then the actual progression in crafting was a chore too. The class quests of Heavensward required you to have master books to be able to complete them. Getting scripts, newly introduced, was difficult because of needing a baseline of gear. which you wouldn't really be able to do.
Lynx wanted cross-class back in the game, yes. He wanted all of this garbage back in the game. But I don't think he really wanted it back in the game. I think he just wanted to try to shit on the game. No one with a brain actually wants that type of stuff.
Fresh
He
at
just
60, unless
He
you
just brought it up because he wanted to make the game look bad.
were already established as a crafter, or had funds to buy decent gear. Then there's the crafts themselves and rotations used. Materials with a high level of difficulty to obtain or a large number needed. If I say the word camphor, I'll give many crafters a PTSD flashback. Then the
What is that, camphor?
rotation most commonly used, as far as I had seen, was Maker's Mark, or Mama. What the Mama rotation did at endgame in Heavensward was give you, say, 40 stacks of a buff that decreased 1 per step, and you would use all 40 of these stacks. While you had that 40 stack of buffs, you could use a skill that cost no durability, no crafting points, but only raised progression by 20 points. You would hit this button over and over and over. Your goal was to hit a specific minimum progression by the end, and max out your points from Tricks of the Trade usage before the quality phase. All in all, a 50 to 60 step process per craft. And remember, this skill had a failure rate, so on a rare chance, you could completely need to change your rotation to make up for missing progress. Infamous and unsustainable, Mama was removed from the game. If it wasn't, it would have become worthless, or given you literally hundreds of stacks to use. Progress at the time capped out at 1,000 for things with a high-quality version. We are now at more than 4 times that. There was no choice but to remove it, or entirely change it, which essentially would still be removing it, and I do not miss it. It was not the only rotation, but it was just about the most consistent option. This is where specializations also came in. That buying materials from other crafters to be able to make stuff as, say, just a carpenter, that was required to make the raiding gear.
This
in
person's
Heavensward.
speaking a different language to
Only a leather
me.
worker specialist could make the brand new leather the new gear needed.
Are any of you in
and
chat,
that applied to the gear.
real quick, are any of you in chat having PTSD right now? Here comes the pause champ. Here comes the band, pause champ. Here comes the band. Here it is. Oh, boom! There it is.
Itself, too. So the fact that you could only have 3 specialists was a huge sticking point. Nowadays, the system might not be completely awful. Levels aside, the barrier for entry is
I gave up
much
in crafting
lower.
in a Realm Reborn.
Script gear is easy to farm with things like custom deliveries being so numerous, and so much else making things far more bearable. It could inject new life into the crafting system, but also it could equally destroy the entire economy.
Don't make fun of
so
zines.
let's maybe not.
Thank you, Valerie.
But at the time,
so nice.
this received huge backlash and is why the system basically does nothing now. Specialists can craft current patch music and furniture from extreme drops, and that's about it.
You are a miner.
An abandoned system
Do you
because it
mind these
received
nuts in
such
your mouth?
harsh criticism.
Got him.
The Gathering side was equally contentious, to the point of not just abandoning a system, but outright removing it. Who remembers the favor system? You could spend scripts on essentially leave tokens to start a gathering leave in a specific location. You had about 5 minutes to gather as much as you could. You needed these resources for
I was never a gatherer.
something. I honestly forget. But again, this was a disliked system, and they have since removed it.
Like, even though I
However,
don't know what he's talking about, I'm watching the Twitch chat. I'm watching you guys type, and you guys are like, you guys are not not in favor of most of these systems in the game.
This one, I would definitely say it is time to give a second chance. This was actually a good idea that was too early. To repeat myself, at the time, getting to 60 was difficult, getting gear was difficult, and establishing yourself was far from simple. I think at the end of the expansion, making the leap into an on-content crafter cost me 20 mil. This was the only real way in, since scripts were so rare.
Wasn't crafting much more expensive back in the day than it is now? Isn't it like really easy to level your crafters now? Because back in the day, I remember it was quite expensive.
And Zloe wouldn't be added until 3.55. That much is a win for Heavensward 2. Custom deliveries make getting into the system so much easier. But now, yeah, we have Zloe and Kurenai and everyone else. At the absolute worst, you can overlevel into Stormblood gear,
What's Zoe? Kara and I.
go back to
Oh,
Zloe,
custom deliveries. Okay.
and start amassing a script base to buy
I thought it may have been
A cousin.
by script gear. You can insert yourself into the gear curve far easier than before, and without any real funding. So something like favors would be far less difficult to get into as well, since you have plenty of leftover scripts. If anything, I feel the main criticisms people have all boil down to the patch formula. People want things to be shaken up, and I think favors, properly tooled and discussed, would be a good way to shake up the gathering side of things. Sure, it boils down to the same thing as always. Gathering isn't something you can make all that much more complex, but it's something new. Old. New. Old new. But yeah, it was super hard to get into. No Ishgardian Firmament and Diadem to power level, and costing scripts you could barely obtain. It was a mess and quickly discarded. It's almost a surprise the collectible system as a whole wasn't also removed. This too was a Heavensward thing.
Man, I don't
Diadem,
know anything what he's talking
Diadem
about.
is the only piece of content in the game to be removed from the game not once, but twice.
Dude, Diadem was so bad. It was so bad. It was so fucking bad, man. Oh my god. Critically acclaimed expansion, by the way.
In the game to be removed from the game not once, but twice. Diadem in the Ishgardian Firmament is actually the third attempt at the content. It was hated and failed twice in Heavensward. The first 2 times required you to use free company airships, also added in Heavensward, I believe, to get to it. And what you did there was just a...
Oh god, wait a minute. The very first iteration of Diadem you couldn't even go into unless you had a company airship, right? You couldn't even queue into it. You had to have the company airship, right? If you didn't have a house, you just couldn't go.
Watered down version of hunts. You would kill enemies to spawn giant Brachiosaurus enemies which had the big loot. It also had a gathering component that I never saw anyone talk about. But what was the loot these enemies dropped? Ethereal gear. What is ethereal gear? Well, pink rarity gear. That means it has random substats attached. This can be something good, something bad, a small amount, or a big amount. So doing this content was technically an alternate way of gearing that relied on a level of RNG beyond anything you could imagine in this game.
Yeah.
So the drops weren't specific drops. You got coffers that you had to roll on, so you could end up getting nothing through a trip if your rolls were bad enough. Then you open the coffer and one...
This is open world content. Well, not open world, but this is high scale content. There's a shit ton of people in here, and all of them are rolling on that loot.
1, hope it's gear that your main can use, and 2, hope its stats aren't trash. I believe that no matter how good they were, they did not surpass the best in slot from rating. But if you got really, really lucky, you could get comparable gear.
So the ethereal gear could be better. It was so rare to get the gear that was better because even if the item level was better, it didn't necessarily mean it was better. And the reason why is because you could have a higher item level gear, but it could have no stats on it. That's the point. You could get a higher level piece, but you could roll bad on the stats. So even though the item level was higher, the gear was worse because it literally wouldn't have any stats on it. They're wrong about the gear not being better than raid gear because in some cases there were, but the cases were so few and far between that it almost didn't matter.
From an otherwise extremely mindless task. More mindless than any relic, I would say. The battle side died pretty quick, and I don't know how alive the gathering side was, and so they needed to retool the content, and so they did. Diadem V2 was basically just fate farming to basically the same exact end, ethereal gear. But there was a new...
Okay, I'm going to time you out, Apollo, and here's the reason why. Because anyone that played back then, if they knew someone that got a piece of that pink gear that was better than the raid gear, you blacklisted them. You blacklisted them.
New aspect to this. There was a chance for an emergency mission to crop up. This was a signal for everyone in the instance to run to the giant crystal in the middle for a mission. I have never cleared the emergency mission, because you had a significant chance of there being at least one troll or otherwise jerk who didn't follow any directions or anything. because
The emergency mission was very punishing. Now, I cleared several times, but I also did it on stream. And I had a bunch of people from stream that went in there with me. And okay, guys, this is going to sound mean. But back in the day, player skill mattered a lot more. Okay, I'm just going to say it. You couldn't suck back in the day. And if you sucked, no one wanted to play with you. Okay, look, I said it there. Okay, it is true. Okay, you can hate me for that. But if you sucked at this game back in the day, no one played with you. Blame Heavensward. Don't blame me. Blame Heavensward. I'm not joking. Times are much different now. But I could tell you this. When this person just said that they never cleared because of one fucking idiot, that's true. When you did the emergency mission, while it wasn't the hardest thing, you needed coordination and you could not fuck up. Okay? It was very punishing.
essentially, this was a mini alliance raid kind of thing, but with more people. You had to split up, kill enemies, then kill the big one in the middle. More often than not, you would immediately wipe the moment you zoned in.
Yes.
Someone would pull on purpose, or just be impatient.
Yep. The way the content was designed, you would zone in, and if someone was new, they would probably just run in, pull a mob, and kill everybody. And it was over. I'm not joking.
Or whatever. Of the few times I was able to get in, I never saw anything die. Well, I did. Everyone in the duty. Repeatedly. And people wondered why Baldezian Arsenal runs were so insistent on keeping non-pre-made people out. Trusting some rando can be pretty hard when the risks are so...
Oh, God. Okay, BA was just a sliver, just a little sample taste of what emergency mission was.
high. But if you got the chance to go in and won the chance to get a group who could clear, you had a chance at a weapon coffer with a chance
Yep.
to be your main and a chance
Yep.
to have good substats.
Yes.
What item level was this 1 in 1,000 chance weapon? 280? Eye level 2.
Yeah. So just to give you guys an example, right? This weapon could have 1 crit, 1 skill speed, 1 accuracy, and 1 parry. Or it could have 100 parry, 100 accuracy, 100 skill speed, and 100 crit.
280? Higher than anything
I had one, but the one I had was really bad.
else in the expansion, even Savage rating. So if you got even a bad substat roll,
It's a random job too. Oh, you thought by opening that coffer you got the weapon? No, dude. No, it was random. It was random stats, random job. You could be a warrior main and get a fucking white mage staff, dude.
or you probably had a weapon better than rating. People were livid. The narrative I heard repeated many times was that FF logs locked down in a sort of protest of these weapons.
Somewhat true.
But
That's
really
true.
it was probably at most a split for an even playing field.
No, that's what it was. When you got the coffer and you opened that weapon, whatever weapon you got was your new main. So you better hope you get a main that you want.
Whatever your opinions on parsing are, there can be healthy competition within this. This extreme rare chance in a game otherwise not built around this isn't MapleStory, is extremely unfair to whatever fair competition could be had. While people are often asking for a level of horizontal progression that FF14 lacks, be it from random chance or anything, I don't think anyone feels that this was it.
No, it
That the
wasn't.
game should go in this direction.
No.
This deep into layers of RNG, there can be something to shake up gear progression, maybe their plans in Dawn Trail of how to better integrate VNC dungeons, but this was not the right call. Once again, Diadem failed, people stopped doing it, and it got removed yet again. Only to come back in Shadowbringers with the current gathering-only version. Imagine if
Excuse me.
Eureka was received this way. Bosia, the big mass player content of Heavensward, was poorly received twice in a row and removed twice in a row. Something you cannot say in any way for Eureka and Bosia, no matter how much criticism those got. The original Diadem maps, I believe...
I think it's crazy how much praise Eureka and Boja get now. During the time, there was people that still loved it, but there was also people that absolutely hated it, that thought it was so fucking boring, that thought it was miserable, that thought it was lazy content. But now that it's not in the game anymore, everyone fucking loves it. And that's what's going to save the game. I've always been in the same mind. casual content, you go in and you like AFK or you just have fun. It's very, very chill. I didn't expect it to be better than that. I didn't expect it to be worse than that. But there are people that their attitude just fucking flips and just changes. When it was in the game, they hated it. Now that it's out of the game, it needs to be back in the game to save it. That type of mentality, I think, is just so stupid, man.
Believe are now just completely gone. The current version is definitely the best received, but Heavensward had to fail twice to get that far.